High workload in the mind causes the demand of high energy, which causes the heart to work harder and faster in driving the blood to the brain, which is then met by the high resistance from the constricted blood vessels because of the stress response in the body. Hi, I'm Coach Claude, and I'm going to help you understand high blood pressure and get you treated in 5 minutes. As you can see on this, I have already put down the diagram I'm going to use to save time. I'm going to use, instead of explaining, I'm going to use a comparison approach to compare how our mind works to how the computer works. Okay, as you can see, we have a human here, a human brain, and the mind working through it. And we have the lungs, which supplies energy in the form of oxygen. And we have the heart that pumps the blood carrying oxygen to the brain. And just to let you know, the brain is one organ in the body that uses a lot of energy. You don't have to be a physician to understand these concepts. You can look them up yourself. Now, why does this matter? All these three organs, the brain, the lungs, and the heart, they are all directly interconnected. Therefore, to understand how these things works on a human being, we're going to use a computer metaphor because it is so widely used. Everyone has a computer. Right now, probably the phone you are listening from is actually a computer, a smartphone. It's simply a computer whose purpose is dedicated for telecommunications, but it is actually a computer. And inside of it, we have a processor, just like you can see on this model of a laptop. And the processor is the one that computes or processes or handles all the tasks about conversion or whatever streaming data coming through it. So that we have the data you call the megabyte or the bits going, whether you are computing calculations, whether you are watching a video, anything, they all go through it as streams of data or bits, and they are computed by it. Now, the more the workload is, or what we call transactions or instances going through the processor, the more energy it demands, it uses. And you have noticed that when you have a laptop on your laps, or even a phone, like using a high-demanding tasks such as GPS and probably playing games on it and browsing the internet, you have noticed that it gets warm and actually hot. And so some laptops have fans to cool it down so that it can help it keep working. If it doesn't, it may actually stop working or not respond better as you would want it to. Bigger computers, or like those we have in the data centers, actually do have like a big fans to keep everything cool. Now, another way of cooling it down is actually to restart it or shut it down so that it can clear the memory or the auxiliary memory, the one we call RAM or random access memory. This is like a temporary memory where it saves everything it is processing temporarily before you can actually transfer them to save them on a hard drive or on an external device. So that the bigger the random access memory, the more work it is able to handle. And so the size of the RAM and the processor are also directly interconnected, influence each other. However, regardless whether it has a bigger memory and a faster and a capable processor, whenever it is processing a lot of amount of data, a lot of tasks, it still heats up anyway. And so it needs to be cooled down and sometimes even restarted to clear the memory and start fresh. Now, why is that important? On a human being, the brain is considered as the processor, the physical processor, while the mind working through it is considered as those transactions or instances, because the mind isn't a physical component of the brain. It's simply an energy processes, the thoughts, made up of thoughts. The thoughts are the ones that are equivalent to instances or processes, those streams of bits of data streaming through it. So that the bigger the workload you have in the mind, the more energy the brain demands. And we know that the energy is supplied to the brain by the heart, pumping oxygen and vehicled by the blood to the brain. Therefore, the higher workload you are processing in your brain, the more the heart will work. And that means if the brain doesn't rest, the heart will not rest. And if the heart doesn't rest, the whole body will not rest. And we all know that just like a car, you need to bring it to a shop for repair and maintenance. The whole body system gets to rest and do the maintenance when we are asleep or when we are at rest. But by working too hard in your mind, you will see that you are preventing all those processes from happening. And that's why it can actually lead to cardiovascular diseases and everything else that are not so good. So that the treatment is simple. Simply, we would say reduce the amount of workload you are having in your mind, just like shutting down the computer or restarting it. The only time we do that on a human being is when we are asleep, except that the mind can still process and make reports of what we have been focusing on the day so that we can have them closer by when we wake up in the next morning. So the main way or the proper way to do it is actually to do it when you are awake, when you are not sleeping. And that is what includes like reducing the workload in the mind or reducing the transaction that you are having. And that means focusing on fewer or single task. And that what brings in something like a technique, like a 10 minutes breathing technique. Which is actually like the basic process or the basic step towards a proper treatment called like a meditation. That is, the aim is to focus on fewer on fewer transactions, on fewer thoughts, which means if, for example, if you are breathing, how it does that is the fact that when you are aware that you are breathing, it means you are here in the present moment, because we know you can only breathe in the present moment. And when you are present, that means you are processing fewer things, because right here where you are right now, there are very few things to look at and to process in your mind through your sensory organs. And so that reduces the workload in the mind, and that means the heart pumps or works lesser, and that means everything goes to rest. I hope that helps. And in combinations with cooling down the mind, the other natural effective way of relieving high blood pressure is physical exercise. What it does is expanding the blood vessels, an outcome called vasodilation, which is actually the same outcome the drug offered for high blood pressure does. They expand the blood vessels so that the blood can flow through easily, thereby reducing the work on the heart. The problem with using drugs is the fact that once they become metabolized and eliminated out of the system, you're going to need more drugs, and thereby becoming drug dependent, and your condition becomes manageable instead of curable, because you actually manages the things you have, except that in this case you don't want to have it, you want to get rid of it. Also, in this case, we are talking about this kind of high blood pressure, which is due to lifestyle change, with emphasis to being stressed. We are not addressing those that are due to other factors and being overweight or chronic diseases. So be well, and God bless you.